Deep in the heart of the great American woodlands, stretching far and throughout the Pacific Northwest, there echoes a legend. A legend recounted only in tall tales by terrified travelers or sly stories by estranged scientists.
There have been sightings every 10, 15 years. You can look it up in history books practically.
It is known simply by its iconic nickname, Bigfoot. The figure of Bigfoot has since become a cultural icon, from grainy camcorder footage to blockbuster Hollywood movies.
At the very least, there's no question that the phenomenon exists. People claim to see this creatures. It's part of the American psyche.
Yet decades later, scientists, historians, and environmentalists alike ponder the creature's very existence. Could Bigfoot be real? Is it a new species of animal? A missing link? Or perhaps something more paranormal? Take a walk in the park with us as we discover what secrets this bewildering beast may be hiding. Let's go on a hunt for Bigfoot. Despite its global popularity originating from America, there have been similar stories of giant ape men since time immemorial. Seemingly every country and culture had their own names for similar figures that have popped up in folklore record.
I've been interested in Bigfoot since the early 60s. I started off in junior high school just reading, and from that point on, I got involved and I can't let go. Each country has their own name for it. Each state in the United States, except for Hawaii and Rhode Island, has a Bigfoot. But the hoaxes come from every state in the Union, every country in the world, and I think it'll continue for as long as man's on Earth. It gives them something to do. I think I've said it before that man needs their monsters. You need something that's just out there, just out of your reach, that you can't quite touch, to keep you going, something interesting to do.
In Australia, tales of a similarly described beast known as the yowie were passed down through Aboriginal tribes for many years. In the Himalayas, stories of the infamous yetis originate, known throughout most of the West as the abominable snowman.
The first thing that got me going was a news item that I can remember of the Himalayas and the abominable snowman. From that point on, I found every book I could, every news article. Very little was on TV, but in 1959, there was a movie called The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas with Forrest Tucker. I watched that several times, and it kept me going.
The origins of the Yeti are attributed to Sherpa folklore. Numerous anecdotal sightings have been reported, accompanied by photographs allegedly capturing elusive glimpses, along with colossal footprints preserved in plaster casts. Across the Pacific, Native American tales describe tall, forest-dwelling creatures covered in hair. 1,000-year-old petroglyphs created by the Yokuts tribe supposedly depict them. Bigfoot's other name, Sasquatch, is believed to be an anglicized version of Saskets, the Halkomelem word for hairy man. The prominence and abundance of Bigfoot-like figures suggests that the phenomena could be considered as an undiscovered species, rather than a singular, isolated oddity. In 1924, this centuries-old legend resurfaced. 5 men claimed to have had a violent encounter with gorilla men on Mount St. Helens, Washington, in an area which would later go on to be known as Ape Canyon. They reported the hairy figures pelted their cabin with boulders before fleeing, leaving large footprints in their path. The US Forest Service would investigate the site of the incident, but found no compelling evidence to prove its legitimacy. This event was written off as simply a hoax and an attempt to stir up trouble. But what if what these men said was true? The name Bigfoot is matter of fact to the populace now. But where did such a strange name come from? 1958. Six Rivers National Forest, California. Jerry Crew, a bulldozer operator for a logging company, stumbled upon a curious find. Imprinted within the mud lay a series of gargantuan humanoid footprints, 16 inches each in length. Although vaguely humanoid in shape, this was no man. Crew's revelation sparked intrigue. His crewmates recounted similar encounters at other work sites in the area. Their stories caught the attention of local newspapers, which coined the name Bigfoot. Before they knew it, they had a breakthrough on their hands. The story swiftly gained momentum, becoming a viral sensation, spreading to every corner of the US. Numerous supposed sightings throughout the Pacific Northwest began to form a collective image of Bigfoot, a towering, muscular, ape-like creature cloaked in thick fur.
One thing everybody agreed on was it didn't move exactly like a man, or it didn't move exactly like an ape, but it had its own type of biomechanics. It moved in its own manner. The way it stepped out, the knee was always kept at a slight bend. It leaned forward, its neck and head. That's one thing they always say is Bigfoot doesn't have much of a neck. It's almost like the head is sitting on the shoulders. When in fact, it's just a short neck.
The tally of reported Bigfoot sightings in the US has since exceeded 10,000, a number that is sure to raise some eyebrows, providing a wealth of diverse information, as well as possible validity to these claims. Some claim to have caught whiffs of Bigfoot in their area, likening the scent to a potent blend of skunk, decaying animals, and refuse. Others report hearing unnerving sounds, even what they perceive as some sort of a grunting, growling, primitive language, recorded and analyzed by cryptolinguist Scott Nelson. Nelson's scrutiny of recordings like the Sierra Sounds led him to conclude it is definitely a language, it is definitely not human in origin, and it could not have been faked. Upon listening to the beastly noises, some report having adverse reactions such as dizziness, nausea, and anxiety. You might assume that some having a reaction as such to sound is absurd. But there is science that supports this. Infrasound is a low-level frequency that is not consciously perceived by humans and is thought to have profound physical and psychological effects. Perhaps Bigfoot is capable of producing such a noise. Maybe this is how it hunts. Other hoaxes similar in nature have surfaced over the years. One such example is the infamous Snowwalker tape, showing a strange, unidentified creature in the frozen wastes, capturing the attention of cryptozoologists and Bigfoot believers everywhere.
The Snowwalker video was quite intriguing because it presented a rather clear, unobstructed daylight view of the subject. We were given a very brief opportunity to examine the film immediately before our interviews. It was screened on a large screen television set, which was of limited utility for making detailed observations because of the lack of quality in the picture. We later did see a small portion of the segment which had been allegedly digitized into the computer, and those images were sharper and crisper on the computer monitor than they were on the television monitor. It purports to depict a creature moving across a snowfield, a rock-strewn snowfield, somewhere in the Himalayas, near Tibet or Nepal. Unfortunately, we have absolutely no other or confirmed contextual information regarding the identity of the witnesses or the precise location, and therefore no way to confirm those aspects of the film. I must say that my initial impressions were very interested or intrigued in that what I saw, the motions appeared to be rather natural, and the configuration of the subject was somewhat more ape-like than I had expected, in the sense of the way in which the head was on the shoulders and the relative lengths of the arms and so forth. But it quickly adopted a more upright posture as it began to walk up this snowfield.
Like many other videos of Bigfoot, the footage is frustratingly low definition. Bigfoot expert Larry Lund began an investigation.
We have this snow walker video, as it's called, and supposedly come out of Himalayan mountains. Now, when it came out, you'll see here, this creature was sitting along a trail in the snow. Now, he's slowly getting up here, and from this distance, when most of us agree on this creature looks pretty good. He's got bulk. His arms look quite long here, but you've got to take in consideration he's in deep snow also, so his arms will be closer to the snow than he would be to the ground. But as he gets up, he stumbles a bit, which you would probably do in the snow, so we have no fault with that. And then he starts to step out. The only problem we have with this film is here it comes again from nowhere. We have no name of the people that shot this film. We don't know where it came from. They were supposedly on a round-the-world trip and couldn't be reached. They sent this to a TV program, said, here's a film of a Yeti. The thing is, a few months before this, I think 9 to 10 months, I received a phone call, as did others in my field, from a French-speaking couple. Now, I learned now that it's Flemish, which I didn't know about. And they asked Mr. Lund, where would I go to film a Bigfoot? So I told them, up in the Rockies, into Canada, Washington, Oregon, California, very good places to go looking for the Bigfoot. Then, lo and behold, 9, 10 months later, here comes this film out of nowhere again. We can't trace it down, who shot it, sent to a TV program, Flemish-speaking couple, and lo and behold, they got a film of a Bigfoot.
Another piece of footage that has sparked much debate is a film known as the Ohio tape.
My initial impressions of the Ohio video clip from Mr. Kappa are obviously very limited. It was a very cursory viewing of it. This piece of footage also suffers from the same shortcomings that we experienced with the Yeti video, in that we have absolutely no contextual information. We can't go to the scene.
Now, we have a tape from Ohio that was sent to a man in Michigan who's been researching for years. It shows a creature in the snow, and what we don't like about this is it looks too much like a man. You'll notice in this tape, and I'll show it to you now, that it starts from left to right, and it's hiding in the trees right here, right in the V of this tree. And now it will start off and go to the right.
Aspects of the gait in particular, and the demeanor, the carriage of the body, the position, the center of gravity, what appeared to be a superficial attempt to imitate the gait that was characteristic and quite distinct of the subject in the Patterson film, but a very poor representation of that gait. So my impressions would not be very optimistic, and would be very reserved at this point.
Across the globe, countless sightings, reports, and anecdotes point toward the existence of cryptids like Bigfoot. The sheer volume of these accounts invites scrutiny, and for many, that scrutiny solidifies belief.
Well, clearly there are questions as to the appropriateness of investing time and energy and resources to investigate something that most people just simply chalk up to folklore. At the very least, there's no question that the phenomenon exists. People claim to see this creatures. It's part of the American psyche at present. But beyond that, this phenomenon leaves physical traces of its passage, or allegedly leaves physical traces of its passage. And therefore, it has all of the qualifications of any zoological investigation. And therefore, personally, I think it's a very legitimate line of investigation, especially given my research expertise. And since one of the principal evidences for the existence of these creatures is the footprints which they leave, then they beg to be assessed. And there are ways to assess the probability that a footprint is authentic versus fraudulent.
There is one tape, however, that dwarfs them all in terms of popularity and observation. The Patterson tapes.
You know, this thing's been going on since the 1700s, actually before that. Indian legend goes way back. And things happened over the years that people said, you know, that's that creature again. It kept popping up. And then we come into the 60s. On October 20th, 1967, 1:15 in the afternoon, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin were riding up Bluff Creek, California. And behind a log jam, they disturbed a creature that stood up. And that is the Bluff Creek film now, the Patterson-Gimlin film. This creature walks away. It's 952 frames of 16 millimeter film. And this creature goes halfway through, turns and looks at us and walks away into the forest. It doesn't run, it walks very abruptly. It just wants to get away. And this film has changed the whole Bigfoot thing.
1967. The infamous Patterson-Gimlin film made its way into the public consciousness.
In 1967, everybody looked at it. Even the University of British Columbia studied it. Patterson himself and a few others took the film around. Rene Dahinden took it to Russia. They studied it in Russia. And everyone come up with the same conclusions at the time, that they thought it was real. And then the professor started coming out of the woodwork. This thing cannot be real. We have no hard evidence. This is only a film. So there's been controversy from day one. There's been pro and con on this film.
It was the biggest evidence yet of Bigfoot's existence. This was truly where Bigfoot mania was born. Filmmakers Roger Patterson and Robert Gimlin had ventured into the woods where crew had previously found the footprints. They were on a quest to discover the monster with their own eyes. Their investigation brought them before a stream in the woods, where suddenly they spotted a figure lurking on the opposite bank. Panicking, they desperately scrambled for the camera in their bag to capture what they believed to be the elusive creature itself. The shaky cam footage shows exactly what people had reported those years ago. A hairy, ape-like figure moving across the scenery menacingly. They attempted to give chase, but lost it in the heavy undergrowth of the forest. Returning to their campsite both amazed and terrified, they made plaster casts of both left and right footprints left behind. Even though the footage is less than a minute, the film endures as the most iconic representation and turned into a global icon. It has convinced people all around the world that Bigfoot does exist. Jeff Meldrum, a professor of anatomy at Idaho State University, was fully on board with what he saw and believed it to be true. He took it upon himself to study every last minute detail of the video to see what can be deciphered.
My area of expertise is primate functional morphology, or the functional aspects of the shape of anatomical structures in primates, particularly how they move. I've looked at the Patterson film very carefully from a very different vantage point than my first exposure to it as an impressionable youth. Now from hopefully a more objective and more authoritative position. I've looked at its anatomy and tried to note and assess aspects of its anatomy that might indicate one way or the other. These footprints are very impressive to me, not because of their uniformity, but because of the variation in foot flexion and toe position that one can see from one track to the next. Were it simply a static prosthetic foot, you would expect a much more consistent trackway with one footprint resembling its successive footprint very closely. But instead we get dynamics of the footprint that indicate flexibility.
It is said to be one of the most heavily scrutinized pieces of film in American history. Second, only to the footage of JFK being assassinated. People from all over the world were captivated by the cryptid footage, and everyone was desperate to find out if what they saw was real or if it was a fabrication.
The transmission of weight is evident in the footprint from one spot to the next. There's pressure ridges, there's tension cracks, and so forth. Clearly, there's no way to determine with 100% confidence that a footprint is authentic. But there are means to assess the probabilities. And these features have to do with the dynamic interaction of the foot with the substrate as opposed to an artificial contrivance or a false foot being stamped into the ground. We have a combination of evidence of extreme weight causing a deep impression in the soil, but also dynamics of the foot that show a smooth transition from heel to midfoot and occasionally to toes. But these features in the form of pressure ridges, tension cracks, these are indicative of a dynamic living foot. Some people, in looking at that foot, and this is characteristic of the initial responses of some of the experts that were shown the film several decades ago, was that the foot looked unnatural. It looked extremely light-colored. It looked like a padded fake foot. In my opinion, those aspects are exactly what I would expect to see. The light color is congruent and consistent with any higher primate that has a thickened, keratinized plantar sole. You know, you look at any human, from a white individual to a black individual, and it's clear that the melanin or the pigmentation on the sole of the foot is much sparser than it is elsewhere on the body, on both the soles of the feet and the palms of the hands. You can see that by looking at great apes that are very darkly pigmented. The plantar surfaces of their feet are lighter, not as light as they are in humans, but they're lighter, and also depending on the thickness of the keratinized or the dead layer of the thick skin on the sole of the foot. There's also the possibility that this individual was apparently standing in the creek at the time of the encounter and walking across the sandy sandbar in wet feet. Some of the light-colored sand had adhered to the sole of the foot. A third possibility is that the sunlight at the time of the filming was quite bright. And you see this on the face, where bare areas of skin are quite reflective of the sunlight. And so some of that lightness might be a little bit artifactual, in that the film is slightly overexposed and those bare areas of skin are just rather reflective of the bright sunlight.
Of course, footprints are easily fabricated, according to those who have been researching for a long time.
One thing about footprints, too, is the fact that they can be easily faked. You can make one. You can sit down and hand form one in the sand and pour some plaster in it, and there you have a foot, no matter what size you want to make it. And we've had them up to 24 inches long, which is ridiculous. One thing about having the tracks, that is one of our hard evidences. You can take that, measure the track, the width and length of it, and you can get approximately, within an inch or so, the height of the animal that made that track.
The Patterson-Gimlin tape, though contentious in nature, remains to this day as the proper smoking gun evidence for the existence of Bigfoot to so many people. So was this a mere fabrication or the real deal? To those with the proper academic knowledge, there are conclusive methods to figuring this out, and oftentimes, mere word of mouth isn't enough. Proper investigative analysis can be conducted in person. You would think this would be the end of the investigation right here, but surprisingly, in-person sleuthing of the trackways yielded compelling results.
What happens here is we have a professor over at the Oregon Primate Center that helps us on that, and by having a footprint, you can take that and measure out from the toe to the ball, from the ball to the heel, and that will give you the approximate height. This is a formula that's been worked out over the years, and will give you the height of a man, for instance. One thing about the tracks, if you have 3 or 4 in a row, is you can look at yourself, and if they have any slight variances to them, it gives you a pretty good idea that at least they're not a stamped-in foot, that someone made a pattern and just stamped it in. You look for those differences. That's the first thing you look for when you go to the ground. I've been taken to places where there's tracks many times over the years, and I have no way of knowing how they made them, but sometimes I get the sense that I'm being hoaxed. Twice, I think that I saw some real tracks. Whether they've been made by a man's foot, I didn't know, but a fairly large foot at that.
With how big of a craze Bigfoot mania truly was, many tried their best to turn in falsified footage or recount spurious stories, but this wasn't enough to assuage the die-hard believers.
We were instructed that they had people who were employed by a brokerage house or a clearinghouse who scoured the countryside for potential footage of various things, ranging from Yeti to UFOs to you name it, and that those were then stockpiled and made available to various production agencies, and that they periodically would preview or review some of those new acquisitions, at which time they took note of the Yeti film and thought that this might have some value, both from a promotional standpoint and from a scientific standpoint. They then contacted the International Society for Cryptozoology, which is a professional organization that has a board of directors composed of academics from a variety of disciplines from around the world, that investigates reports and anecdotes about zoological phenomenon.
It seemed to all the world as though there certainly was a terrifying beast lurking within the woods. However, the evidence against Bigfoot's existence presents a compelling counterargument.
I started researching the Patterson film when I was very young. In it, at first, I tried to ascertain the height of the individual, and in particular, I was fascinated by the stride between the footprints. They either were made within the parameters of a human being or they weren't. My impression of the Patterson film then, especially now, is that it is a hoax. It is a human being in a fursuit. When you look at the Patterson film, it's obvious that the people that faked this went to a fair amount of effort. This was not a typical gorilla costume one could buy at Halloween, for example, but it is a hoax. It is not real, and they put a lot of effort into it. Give them credit for that. But to say that it's real, no. That's making a statement that is not derivable from real science or the facts. The fact that we have never found the actual suit doesn't create a mystery. They could have burned the suit, they could have destroyed it. If I had faked this, I wouldn't have left any evidence around. A good hoaxer will do that. They will destroy all evidence. So the fact that they've never found the suit, or that it didn't come from Macy's or didn't come from some mail order place, doesn't prove that there is no suit.
As compelling as the evidence is in the Patterson tape's favor, the arguments against its authenticity most certainly raises more than a few eyebrows.
I am sick and tired of hearing these scientists make these statements that aren't factual. These scientists are reading in what they want to believe, what they want to see, and as a result of that, the public has the wrong impression. They're not addressing the right issues. The burden of proof is on them to prove this is some sort of extraordinary creature, some alien type creature or primate creature not known to science. And the fact is, none of the Bigfoot evidence holds up. In fact, it falls far short of what science demands as proof to indicate any of it is true.
Rancher and businessman Clyde Reinke claimed to have had inside knowledge proving the Patterson film was a sham. Reinke worked for a film distribution company in the early 70s known as American National Enterprises. He says that Patterson also worked for the company.
I wasn't with the company when the Bigfoot film was shot, but it was shot by an employee, Mr. Patterson of ANE. He was on the payroll as a permanent employee, salaried, as a photographer. That film was totally funded by ANE. It was produced and shot by Russ Nyhart personally in Los Angeles. The film was. That I know, definitely. Because the simple fact the purchase orders for the film that was used to shoot Bigfoot came through my desk. And then immediately when Russ Nyhart delivered the film, he delivered it to me along with plaster casts of book Bigfoot. it came to me.
A&E instructed Patterson to orchestrate the hoax according to Reinke. He even identifies what he suspects to be the man in the suit as someone called Jerry Romney.
Jerry Romney is the ex-basketball star at Brigham Young. He's almost 7 foot tall. And Jerry Romney is also a very close friend of Russell Neihart, the chairman of the board of A&E. Jerry is an insurance broker for Hancock Insurance. And he also holds the entire policy for the company, A&E. Jerry and I became very good friends because Jerry wanted to continue carrying the insurance for the company. So Jerry and I used to go out to lunch quite often, and we went out in the evenings, and we'd go to some of the private clubs in Salt Lake City and so forth. And we invariably, the subject would come around to the Bigfoot. He admitted it several different times to me and just said he had a lot of fun by doing it, except it was awful damn hot in there.
Romney himself admits to having had experience in filmmaking, as well as having worked at A&E, which to many seems awfully suspicious.
A good friend of mine had a company called American National Enterprises. It was the first four-walling, brings back some fond memories. At least I can remember what camera left and camera right is.
Yet, despite what his connections would have you believe, Romney denies being the identity of the man in the suit from the Patterson tape.
She was doing research, and she said, you know, it's been so long ago, there wouldn't be any repercussions if you did want to make the statement that you were the one in that suit. And she said, you know, I could get it on TV and it'd be quite a coup for her, you know. And I said, well, I'd like to help you, but I said, you know, I didn't have anything to do with it, and I don't know anything about it, and I don't believe in it. And, you know, I told her what I just told you. And I also told her that, and she said, well, this source down there, who she said was a former employee, said that Russ Neihart financed it, and I was the one in the suit. All I can do is laugh. In fact, I called Russ and told him, and I told Russ, why don't you call her and talk to her too? She said she ran into this guy down in Hollywood that worked for A&E, and he's the one that told her this. And so she was just calling to investigate it, you know. I guess maybe just because I'm pretty big and close to A&E, and I'd made this other movie with them, you know, and I knew all the executives very well. He just decided that was a good story, that Russ financed this and put me in that suit. But that's not true.
It is impossible to tell from interviews alone whether or not he is telling the truth. However, whether saving face or not, his quick denial to these claims is nevertheless suspicious. Or perhaps he is simply humoring the die-hard believers out there.
I was able to briefly view a piece of video which depicted an individual who, it has been suggested, was the man in the costume in the Patterson film. And this video segment showed this individual walking with a normal gait along a road for the intent of comparing, at least superficially, his gait with that of the Patterson. This individual is of a fairly large stature and could conceivably have been such an individual in the costume. But there are many aspects, or several aspects, that immediately are apparent. First of all, at least in his normal casual walking gait, he employs a very typical human stiff-legged gait. Nothing like the bent-kneed, compliant, powerful gait that's evidenced by the subject of the Patterson film. There are also other aspects of his physique which require more detailed measurement and analysis, but nevertheless my initial impressions are that his limb proportions are not extraordinary, nor are his measurements in the terms of girth. I think he would fall very shy of shoulder and hip girth, as evidenced in the Patterson film subject. This individual also happens to have a very high and prominent forehead. And as I have mentioned, the aspect of contriving a facial mask or a costume that takes into account and accommodates the steep forehead of a human in the sloping forehead of a Bigfoot costume, per se, is a problem.
Romney may deny it, but there are still those who aren't convinced.
Well, the only way that I know definitely it was Jerry Romney in the suit is because Jerry Romney told me so. He used to laugh about it all the time, thought it was a really funny situation. I don't know whether Jerry will ever tell the truth to anybody, but he's the kind of a person that just might.
When I look at the Patterson film, I have to be honest and admit that it matches the general anatomy of Jerry Romney. For example, when I saw Jerry Romney walking, it reminded me of the Patterson film. I couldn't help but notice a similarity. Also, when I analyzed years ago on a computer the height of the creature, I knew it was under 7 feet. Jerry Romney is around 6.5 feet tall. Now, I have to admit that the similarities are circumstantial, but they're fairly persuasive. And when I look at the similarities between Jerry Romney's anatomy, the way he walked, the way he carried himself, versus the Patterson film, and then when I consider how he was defensive about the whole subject of Bigfoot, I'm very suspicious. Once again, Jerry Romney has to address the specific allegations of Clyde Renke. Both men can't be right. One of them is not telling the truth, or one of them has recollections that are in error.
And with so much in question about the validity of these claims made about Bigfoot, even the staunch believers have to sometimes stop and think, does this truly make sense?
The fact that the promoters of the film were not forthcoming with details regarding the identity or the precise location, although they professed to be making efforts to produce that information for us, it was never forthcoming, left the film in a state of limbo. It was essentially of no scientific value to us other than an intriguing prospect of the potential of something interesting, something worth pursuing.
According to Reinke, A&E's strategy was to use the Bigfoot film as a loss leader, positioning it between their other, less sensational films. In essence, it was thought to be a publicity stunt.
After Roger Patterson shot the Bigfoot film, what they would do, they would put the Bigfoot film together with another film, such as Cougar Country, and the Bigfoot film itself would increase the attendance just tremendously.
There have been other productions made based upon stories and research on the fabled beast. In 1972, a documentary inspired by the urban legends was released by Rainbow Adventure Films, titled Bigfoot, Man or Beast.
Patterson thought that he had proved once and for all that the creatures existed, but he found that even the film was in question. As a result, the footage was submitted to experts in various fields.
Coming out at the height of Bigfoot mania, this film was many people's first exposure to the legend and captured the essence of the hunt. Though educational in tone and appearance, the film nevertheless endures as a cult classic from the time period. And perhaps contrary to its intended purpose, it invigorated the passions of those on the hunt for Bigfoot. Both believers and skeptics agree that there is an abundance of hoaxes, and between making money, gaining notoriety, or even blackmail, there are many reasons as to why one would attempt such a thing.
You know, we get these tapes and we look at them, and possibly some of the other people have already seen them and said, hey, what we have here is a real tape of a Bigfoot. Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, there's a lot of eagerness in this field to have a new film to look at, and there's mistakes made. All these people are not experts. You know, they're authorities like myself. You look at these things all these years, but if you haven't seen a real creature, how can you study it and be an expert? You've got to use it a little bit of grain of salt here. You've got to look at it yourself and say, is this real? Is this guy right? Is this guy wrong? Because we all make mistakes. I mean, none of us are perfect. But I think a lot of times, a lot of the authorities want to believe just so there's some new material out there. They don't necessarily think it's real, but they overlook this or that just to make it look better. You certainly can't trust what you see all the time. I mean, I have watched shows over the years on Bigfoot, knowing quite well that something's faked on them, that I've studied that piece myself maybe a year prior and found out it was phony. There is one plaster track that was made by an anthropologist back in Indiana and a friend of mine. And it was sent to another anthropologist who swore up and down that it was real. It's not real, but it's been portrayed such in a book and on TV. Sometimes when a guy comes up with a tape, and you'll notice on different TV shows, radio interviews even, that have sound tapes, if they're close enough, people want to see them, A man can make some money off of his tapes, even though they're hoaxes. Your average TV person, of course, doesn't have any way of knowing if it's a hoax or not. He presents the evidence, lets you make up your own mind. So the person who does come in with that tape, sometimes they make a little bit of money, but it does fade away. Once it's been seen 2 or 3 times, people lose interest in that certain tape and it's gone.
An example of a debunked hoax can be seen with the 1958 Jerry Crews story. Revealed to be a hoax in 2002, almost half a century later, the family of Crews' co-worker, Ray Wallace, discovered a collection of carved wooden feet used to make the large footprints. A common theory is that Bigfoot sightings could in fact be that of black bears. They are a common sighting in North America, which obviously puts them dead center in Bigfoot territory, and are oftentimes mistaken for people from a distance, as when they stand on their hind legs, they have an uncanny, almost humanoid appearance. Curiously, the giant, 2-million-year-old relative of the orangutan, Gigantopithecus, matches up rather closely with common depictions of Bigfoot. This caught the attention of several cryptozoologists in the 60s, who claimed that Bigfoot might have, in fact, been a Gigantopithecus that survived into the modern day. Though ironically this was later proven false in 2002, much like the aforementioned Crews story. The scientific view is that allegations of Bigfoot's existence are a hoax or a delusion of the witness. There is a lack of verifiable evidence, such as skeletal remains or clear video proof. In spite of this, many people across the globe are still convinced, in some way or another, that Bigfoot is out there, patrolling the wildwoods as we speak.
I try to keep my feet on the ground for the fact that there's so many hoaxers out there. If this thing is real, I'd like it to be proven to be real. We don't need all this faking and hoaxing going on.
The Kraken, the vampire, the Loch Ness monster. Stories of terrifying creatures have sparked the imaginations of people since the dawn of time. Bigfoot is more than just a monkey with size 100 shoes. It represents mankind's own quest for knowledge and our grim intrigue of the unknown and deadly.
No matter what you see on Bigfoot, do like I do. Start from the beginning and look for the hoax first. Tell yourself this is probably a hoax and try to prove that it is. When you can't find anything wrong with it, then you start leaning the other way and say, well, hey, this might be the real thing. Let's follow up on it. Let's go to the site where they say it happened. If they'll show me that site and let me see that in the ground, if it's still there, or show me something, then give it a chance. It could be real. You might be the lucky one. You know, I talk to a lot of people, family and friends, that think, Larry, what have you been doing all these years, you know? You sit down there with those films and you read those books and you go out to all these places year after year and you investigate, spend time in the woods. This thing's not real. What are you doing? You know, I think, well, maybe it's not real. Maybe it is. It's not real to some of them, but it's real to a lot of others. And so we pursue it. And I think we'll always pursue it. It is the thing that we do need our monsters. We need something entertaining. But this one, out of all the strange things in the world that we hear about all the time, I think this one has the best chance of being real.
Whilst countless videos have become suspected as fakes, with new ones getting promptly dismissed as such, the legend endures throughout the ages. Despite its many naysayers, the Patterson footage remains, after all this time, as the best evidence we have of the illustrious ape man. Perhaps it's the allure of there being some strange and dangerous being deep in the woods that has kept people fascinated for all these years. Various groups throughout America and beyond swear wholeheartedly to have seen the beast with their own eyes, and often meet up with one another to conduct expeditions in search of Bigfoot, bringing people together through morbid human curiosity. Regardless of the lack of evidence, there is clearly something these people are seeing that makes them not want to give up the hunt. Perhaps they're onto something. Perhaps we should widen the search.